different question, is people who are Christian are asking, why for Jews is Jesus not the Messiah?
Yeah, again, excellent question. The question can logically be asked. In fact, I'm sure you know this, the very early Christians did regard themselves as Jews. Jesus himself, of course, regarded himself as Jews, and many of the apostles, in fact, were Jews. Mm-hmm. And they considered themselves Jewish. In fact, Peter himself differed with Paul, and Peter took the position that a follower of Jesus should practice circumcision and keep kosher and keep the Shabbat because they were Jewish. So the question, and of course we have Hebrew Christians this very day, the question is, well, why can't I be a religious Jew, believe in the Torah, and still say that Jesus is the Messiah?
Exactly, that's what they want to know.
I would say that Judaism has three fundamental issues with Christian theology. Issue number one, which does not go to the messianic aspect of Jesus, but to the divinity and the Trinity and the Holy Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Our problem would be that we believe that God has never and will never assume a human form. And once you deal with the reification or the corporalization of the deity, you are violating a tenet of God to being infinite and non-material. Now that of course goes to the divinity, and that was a later development in Christianity. In terms of the messianic vision, because let's say I say, well, I don't believe that Jesus is God or Son of God, but let him be the Messiah, which we do believe in. So I would say there are 2 points. Point number one is that classical Jewish literature does not accept the notion of a second coming, and that is once the Messiah reveals himself, he will accomplish a designated mission of getting the Jews back to Israel, rebuilding the temple, and hopefully establishing world's peace. Now, Jesus, of course, was crucified. Jesus was murdered before he completed any of those things. And because of that, Christianity developed the idea of a second coming, that Jesus will come back and complete the mission. As I say, as far as normative Jewish theology is concerned, when the Messiah comes, he's going to get the job done, and he's not going to die and then come back. That is point number one. Point number two, which is actually a more important point, is, and again, I'm not going to get into the debate whether Jesus said it or the apostles or later people said it, but the notion that of the New Testament, the notion that God has abrogated his covenant with Israel, and that God has replaced the Sinaitic revelation with justification by faith, which is really Paul's innovation. Paul created the idea that one gets redemption not by works but by faith. That's called justification by faith. That is a theological postulate that is absolutely inconsistent with the eternity of the Torah and the divinity of the Torah. Now again, I understand one could make the argument that that's not Jesus' argument. In fact, there are passages where he says, I'm not going to abrogate a single letter of the Torah. And yet, even within the Christian Bible, there are narratives in which he implies that certain mitzvot are no longer binding, and certainly Paul took the position that none of the mitzvot are binding. And that is a postulate we cannot accept because, as Maimonides writes in his Articles of Faith, even the Messiah will not abrogate or replace the Torah. And that's our problem with Christian theology.